Let's see, consumer demand. And the consumer demand talks about patterns of consumption. It says about 70% of households' budget is spent on housing, transportation, food, health expenditures. Essential items have changed from years ago. And that's what you and I are going to buy when we go to the market. Those are the things we buy. And we talked about determinants of demand. And what determines what we buy? Determines what we buy is our psychiatric explanations. Like, you want to buy food, you want to buy perfume because it keeps you socially accepted. There is idea of economic explanations for these demands. So we look at the psychiatric explanations. It's the desire for goods and services arise from our need for social acceptance, for security, for ego gratification. So we buy things that will make us look good, feel good, feel safe, and keeping us with the genesis, like what everyone else is doing. If your neighbors start to buy, certain things, you start to follow them. Self-preservation, you want to keep yourself, that's why you buy food, you buy shoes. Expressions of affluence. Whatever, there's also those people that affect us by what they buy. Economic explanation, there's prices and income are just as relevant to consumption decisions as more basic desires and preferences. So not only of what we want, but also prices and income, how much income we have, how much the prices are, then we start to make our decisions towards what we buy. And this kind of generates the idea of demand. It is your ability and your willingness to buy specific quantities of good at alternative prices in a given time period, ceteris paribus, everything else constant. And determinant of market demands, we talked about tastes last class, a desire for this and other goods. If a study says ice cream is good for you, the demand for ice cream would increase. And there's income of the consumer. If you won the lottery, you might buy more ice cream, right? Is that true? The demand for ice cream would increase, and this will shift the demand curve to the right. Okay. And then we've got the idea of expectations of income, prices, and tastes. So if you knew you were going to get rich very soon, you probably might start to deplete your savings to buy more ice cream now. Okay, even though you don't have the money now, but the fact that you know that tomorrow you will get it, you start to spend it. Yes, as part of planning for and this would increase the demand for ice cream now. And then we've got the other goods, their availability and prices. So if the prices of chocolate, candy bars increased, you would probably buy ice cream instead of candy bars. Do you see? So here it is, you look at other products, prices may affect your demand for a certain product. And this would increase the demand for ice cream. And then we talked about the number of consumers in the market. If the number of buyers in the ice cream market increased, then the total demand for ice cream would also increase. And the total quantity of a good or service people are willing and able to buy at alternative prices in a given time period. That's how much is market demand. Market demand is a sum of all individuals' demand. And now we introduce this idea of utility theory. Anyone have heard of the utility theory before? Anyone have heard of the utility theory? The utility theory says that economists assume that the more pleasure a product gives, the higher price buyers are willing to pay for it. Okay, so it's a matter of utility. So if you've got two products, this will give you more satisfaction. You're willing to pay more for this because it gives you more satisfaction or utility. And students who like butter are willing to pay more for buttered popcorn than non-buttered popcorn because it offers more total utility. Do you see? That's why some people are willing to pay, you want more nuts on your ice cream, you're willing to pay more for that nuts because it gives you more happiness or utility. Total utility. Now here, utility, it's the pleasure or satisfaction obtained from a good or service. And total utility is the amount of satisfaction obtained from the entire consumption of a product. And here talks about the marginal utility. Anyone have heard of the word marginal? The idea of marginal utility, it is the change in total utility obtained by consuming one additional marginal unit of a good or service. The idea of marginal is one more. So if you're eating, let's see, how many, you're eating bananas. How many bananas you eat per day? If you're going to eat bananas today, how many you eat? One. You eat one. Now, do you get any utility from another one? Yes. Will you get the same satisfaction from the second one like the first one? No. Now the second one will give you less utility. The second one's added utility, we call it the marginal utility. And the idea here talks about this law of diminishing marginal utility. And the law of diminishing marginal utility says that every time you eat one more, the utility becomes less and less and less until it becomes zero, until it reaches negative. Yeah. Remember when you eat too much bananas, number 100 banana will probably, have a side effect. So the marginal utility of a good, it will decline as more of it consumed in a given time period. A student who enjoys popcorn can eat all he or she wants for free. Anyone have seen those, some movie theaters? They will provide you with unlimited popcorn because they know that there is a maximum you can eat. And if you do more than that, it's going to have, bad consequences that will teach you for next time not to exceed the amount of possible. The first box consumed is very rewarding. The second box is good. The third box is decent. After eating the sixth box, you start to get sick. So we start to ask the question, did the sixth box increase satisfaction? No. So, satisfaction does not always increase with more. So it had a negative marginal utility. That's how we say it in economic terms. So as long as, you eat popcorn, you take a first box and you eat it. The second, the first one was excellent. The second was good. The third was okay. Now the fourth, you are full. The fifth, you start to you become sick. So that's just the law of diminishing marginal utility. As long as marginal utility is positive, then the consumer receive additional satisfaction and total utility increase. Now, additional quantities of a good will yield increasing smaller increments of satisfaction. So if you look at your total satisfaction, take the first one, you get satisfaction. Second one, you will not get as much, or rather less, until you reach no more. They start to go negative. So this utility theory says an absolute measure of utility is not possible because the perception of satisfaction differ among individuals. So we would love to have some unit. We call it util. Remember we talked about util? Yeah. Util come from utility, which is satisfaction. But the problem with this util is not the same for everyone. Do you see? Some people from the second banana, they start to become sick. Some people from the fifth, some from the 10th, and so on. And diminishing marginal utility is a common experience. The idea of you take one more, it's less happiness until you reach the sickness, that's maybe more common. And it's sufficient basis for economic predictions of consumer behaviors. So here we start to look at how consumers behave. We have this law. We know as people take more, they will start to have less and less marginal utility. So another question is, why do we waste water even though it's vital to human life?
Human nature.
Why do we waste water if water is so important for human life? There is so much water out there, right? So we consume so much water that additional water offers little, if any, marginal utility. Now we've got this idea of prices and quantity. Many forces will determine how much we are willing to buy. And economists will focus on the relationship between price and quantity, rather than trying to explain all the forces at once. You see? So here, from an economics perspective, let's focus on price and quantity, and not focus on all of these other powers. And we also use the ceteris paribus, all other things being equal assumption. So that becomes an important part of how economists think. And then we talked about the factors of demand. We looked at the concept of marginal utility. Ceteris paribus explained this downward slope of demand curve. So why is the demand curve really going down? Is because of this law of marginal utility. Is that, remember when you want the first, you're willing to pay 10. But maybe for the second, by the time you reach the fifth, you only want 5 more. And then, 10, it becomes very little marginal utility on that. So this kind of also explains the demand curve. And with given income, tastes, expectations, and prices of other goods, people are willing to buy additional quantities of a good only if the price falls. So the first banana, $10, maybe you're willing. If you really love banana, you buy it for $10. But if you want to get the second one, you will not pay 10. Maybe you will pay 9. You see? By the time you have already 9 and you want to get the 10th banana, you're willing to pay only $1 for that. Because your utility from that 10th is very small. So this is kind of another way to explain the demand curve, the utility theory. This is the law of demand. We talked about it last class. And it says, according to the law of demand, the quantity of a good demanded is a given time period increases as price fall, ceteris paribus. And we looked at this curve, which show you, at different prices, all the quantities, and you can see it is dropping. Now, as marginal utility declines, so does the willingness to pay. You guys are okay with this?
Yes.
If you're not okay, raise your hand. Not okay?
No, okay.
Yeah, you're okay? That's great. Okay. Any questions?
Can you just explain that again, please?
The idea of demand?
Yeah, and its relationship to the marginal
utility?
Yes.
Okay. Now here, let's say here you buy 2. At the beginning you're willing to pay a 45 cent price. And, if you want to buy 4, let's say from 2 to 4, those 2 additional units to move from point B to point C, it has to be cheaper. Here you pay 45 cents, but here you're only willing to pay 40 cents. And here you're willing only to pay 35. Why? Because you get less utility. So as marginal utility decrease, so as people willing to pay. And here we talk about price elasticity. Do you guys remember price elasticity examples we talked about, let's say, first class? We talked about 2 examples of elasticities. We talked about issues like oil. If oil prices, increase, how many people will stop buying? Very few. And we said if taxi drivers double their price, people will immediately respond by stopping. You take the next taxi available, or the next bus available. So what is elasticity in definition? It's the response of consumers to a change in price is measured by the price elasticity of demand. Now, how do we do that? The price elasticity of demand is the percentage change in quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in price. Now, I know this sounds a little bit more sophisticated, and if you're not coming from an engineering, math background, this sounds like rocket science. And if you look at this equation, it becomes even worse. And you can also see it in more formats. But the idea is very basic. The idea says like this. You see, the price of a popcorn goes up 20%. Okay? Now, the quantity demanded will go down by 10%. Now, this is what you do. You do the percentage change in quantity demanded, and you divide by percentage change in price. So if we want to highlight some of the words, so here is the quantity divided by the price, and then both have percentage change. So here you take the negative 10% divided by the 20%, you get negative 0.5. So this is how you calculate. Now, I know you already took statistics course and you know how to do these, and probably you've got some calculators you can calculate, and it's not a big challenge. You just divide the percentage change of the demand over change in price, and you get this idea of 0.5%, and it's always going to be negative. Why negative? Because there's always going to be one of these signs negative and the other one positive. Because either the quantity is, remember the quantity and price, it's an inverse relationship. So every time price increase, the quantity will decrease. And every time price decrease, the quantity will increase. So here is what we call, so this number here is what we call the elasticity of popcorn. And it's negative because it's a negative relationship. And it show you here it's 0.5. So for popcorn here, if you increase prices 20%, not all the people will stop buying. They will go back, but little, like half as much as you increase in prices. Is this good sign for you if you sell popcorn, or is it a bad sign? It sounds not bad. It's almost good. You increase your prices with 20% and you only lose 10% of your customers. That's good.
You earn 10%.
You've got some earnings there. So let's see. So here we start to look at this elastic versus inelastic. Demand can be elastic, inelastic, or what we call unitary elastic. The unitary elastic, it means it's one for one. I increase 10, I lose 10%. Okay? I increase my prices, I double my prices, half of my customers go. Do you see? So here we can look at demand is elastic if the absolute value is greater than 1. So if we get elasticity of 1 and above, we say this is elastic. It means people will respond. The example is I increase 1% and then more than 1% go. Okay? I increase my prices 1% and then the customers who leave me will be more than 1%. If it is less than 1%, then it's going to be inelastic. And if I increase 1 and 1% I lose, that will be the unitary. Okay? We will see more examples as we go. Consumer response is large relative to the change in the price. And then we've got this idea of inelastic, which is the opposite. Here we've got the absolute E is less than 1. And consumers are not very responsive to price changes. The unitary, we said, is equals to 1. And the percent change in the quantity will equal percent change in price. Are you guys okay with those 3 cases?
Yes.
All right. So let's see. Elasticity estimates. Here we say products that have an elastic demand are more like airline travel. If I increase the airline travel double, people travel by bus, right? If we increase prices of fish, people move to chicken. Increase prices of new cars, we go to another new cars, or maybe second-used cars. Now, things that has inelastic will be more like cigarettes. Increase the price of cigarettes, smokers will not quit, even though sometimes they may shift, okay? But it needs to be like a big increase. Gasoline, If it increases, you can use wood, but it needs to be like a big. And the same thing with coffee. So we call these inelastic. And then we started to look at price elasticity. Explains why producers cannot charge the highest possible price. So why don't people increase the prices? Because elasticity. And higher prices might actually lower total sales revenue. Total revenue. Do you guys know what we mean by total revenue? Total revenue, it means all of the price of product multiplied by the quantity sold in a given time period. So this is the equation for total revenue. So let's look at this example. Here, if we are in point F, okay? If I'm in point F. Now point F, how much is the price? 25 cents.
Yes.
And how much is the quantity? 12. So if I sell 12 units and every unit I sell for 25 cents, how much is my total revenue?
3.
You see, I'll take 12 multiplied by 0.25 equals 3. Okay? What if I'm in point G?
50 cents into 60.
We've got 20 cents multiplied by 16
3.2.
will be equals to how much? 16 multiplied by 0.2.
3.2.
We'll get 3.2. Now, how much is the revenue if we're in point H?
15 cents into
We'll take 15 multiplied by 20. We'll get 3. Do you see? So here it shows you that if you move from here to here, will you gain or will you lose?
The same revenue, but the more quantity.
the revenue will increase.
See, price cuts will increase the total revenue if elasticity is greater than 1. Okay? So from here to here, what did we see? An increase. But from here to here, we saw a decrease. Okay? So the conclusion is you want to see where are you, how much is your revenue, if you increase prices, what's going to happen. And sometimes you can increase the prices and you gain more revenue. Sometimes you may increase your prices and you get less revenue.
So what is the relation between profit and revenue from point F to point G?
Now here we're not talking about profits. In order to get profit, you need to look at the costs, right? But here we're just looking at total revenue. Okay, so total revenue in point F, you get total revenue of 3.
Yes.
Okay, now here, if you move from point F to point G, in this case it's like a drop in prices. Okay, now you will gain
Point.
Total revenue.
point 2.
But maybe the profit will decrease.
Well, that's another issue. You're talking about, you look at the cost, right? So you also need to look at the cost. But here we're just focusing on this idea of elasticity and total revenue. Okay. Sometimes, sometimes it doesn't really make a big difference how much is the total cost. Or maybe that's another. Let's see. Ceteris paribus. Okay. So here you drop the prices, you get more revenue, and then from point G to point F, you drop the prices also, and you get less revenue. Okay. Now, elasticity and total revenue. A price cut decreases total revenue if demand is priced inelastic. Price cut will increase total revenue if demand is price elastic. And a price cut does not change the total revenue if demand is unitary elastic. Are you guys okay with this?
Yes.
So this is like the ending rule. If the product is elastic, price cut is going to increase because people will respond. Okay, lower the prices, a lot of people come to you. And here you lower the prices, it's inelastic, and then you start to get decreased in total revenue. Here we've got differences in price elasticity as explained by several factors. So here we talked about the idea of necessity and luxury. So which one was more necessity? The coffee or the fish?
Coffee.
The coffee was more necessity, right? And the luxury was what? Maybe the fish in this example. Availability of substitutes. So, for coffee, what are the substitutes?
Tea.
Tea is a substitute for coffee? Listen to this. Do you substitute tea for coffee? So for some people, yeah, it depends. You know, some people they think there is no substitute for coffee, but for some people it's a possible substitute. Let's see, price relative to income. So how much is the price relative to your income? So if your income is $1 million, then a price increase of fish from 1,000 to 10,000, maybe it wouldn't make a difference to you. And then we've got this, so we'll go through them. Necessity versus luxury. Some goods are so critical to our daily life, so we regard them as necessities. Demand for necessities is relatively inelastic, and a luxury good is something that we would like to have but aren't likely to buy unless our income jumps or the price declines sharply. So that's about luxury goods. Luxury good will be what?
What kind of product can you call it
Unitary,
unitary?
they say, some people say education is unitary. If you double your fees, half of your if you double your fees, half of your students leave. That's like a general rule. But it can be a lot. It's ceteris paribus. There's always a lot of other things that play into the demand for luxury goods is relatively elastic. And then availability of substitutes. The greater the availability of substitutes, the higher price elasticity. The smaller the availability of substitutes, the lower the price elasticity. Okay. What do you guys think is today here in Yemen? Is gas and oil, is it still very inelastic, or people just found their substitutes and they're happy? You see?
It depends on application.
You see? So maybe for cars now, we have a lot of cars that shifts to gas. And now they're trying to do this new, the new trend now for oil is that they're trying to make oil where it's no longer that, inelastic. We've got those, cars with batteries and the solar and the hybrid. Price relative to income. If a price of a product is very high relative to the consumer's income, then the demand will be elastic. Okay, people will respond. So, if your salary is 20,000 riyal and the dabba is for 3,800 and it increased to 6,000, then maybe you will stop. You see, because it's a percentage of your income is very big. So if the price of a product is very low relative to the consumer's income, the demand will tend to be inelastic. Are you guys okay with this elastic and inelastic? So elastic is when people respond. And people will respond if their income is not high enough. They will respond if they don't find another substitute. They will respond if... Substitutes goods and complementary goods. Now we talked about substitute goods. What did we say a substitute good? Anything that demand for a substitute good will increase when the price of the product goes up. Okay. So if Pepsi price go up, you move to Coca-Cola. That's an example of a substitute. And a complementary is a demand for a complementary good will decrease when the price of the product goes up. So if the prices of coffee increase and then people stop to buy coffee, then we will see demand for the coffee mate will start to decline. Okay. So that they are complementary goods. People buy them together. Here we talked about change in income, and income is a determinant of demand, and we illustrated income changes with shifts in the demand curve. You remember this from yesterday? You've got more income, demand starts to shift. And then we started to look at this caveat emptor. It's the role of advertising. Advertising campaigns are often designed to exploit our senses and lack of knowledge. So people decide to go and buy things, and one of the things that will influence them is advertising. And advertising is what we call, let the buyer be aware, and that's the caveat emptor concept. So people, as they know more, then they start to change their behavior. And are once created. Now, advertising people try to tell you that's not the only reason consumption has increased. Okay. So it says personality, social interaction, dynamics, they have changed how much we consume. So how much we buy depends on a lot of other factors, not just advertising, but also how we interact with each other. We invite people over for parties, and parties we need to have cakes and more goodies, and people who eat more, they are, feeling good, and some of these makes people buy more. So that's part of a successful advertising campaign is one that shifts the demand curve to the right. So that's what advertisers want. They want a shift in demand. Are you guys okay with this?
Yes.
All right, great. That's the end of the chapter.